ESPN News. I ask you that question. Who says no? Not to just throw crazy trade hypotheticals up against the wall and see what's fun to talk about, but because ESPN NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski has broke this news in the following few hours. First, he tweeted, sources. In calls to front offices, Houston GM Daryl Morey is showing an aggressive desire to improve the roster. Here's the important part. With all players and picks available in talks, it's hard to imagine James Harden's scenario. The rest under contract, perhaps even Chris Paul, could be moved in the right deal. And Woj went on to write in his full article on ESPN.com, the possibility of trading all NBA guard James Harden is believed to be extremely limited. But the rest of the roster, including Chris Paul and Clint Capella, could be more realistic trade targets. Extremely limited. Difficult scenario to imagine, but not impossible. I respect that the Houston Rockets are willing to consider everything. I respect that the Houston Rockets are willing to look at the ceiling they have reached and ask themselves at that moment, what will it take? Because we're willing to do anything, including trading their superstar, including trading their MVP candidate, James Harden. Now, if you're going to trade away James Harden, your options are limited. As Woj said, the scenarios are hard to imagine, but one that I believe makes a ton of sense on the basketball court, off, as far as the age of the various superstars involved. One trade scenario that I think aligns all the stars, if not the realistic one, if not the ones that ring easy in your mind, is LeBron James from the Los Angeles Lakers to the Houston Rockets, and James Harden from Houston out to LA. That one, in my mind, benefits everybody. That one, I have a hard time finding who says no to. You give me a call, 888-729-3776 on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We should be talking to ESPN Houston Rockets reporter Tim McMahon any moment now, and I'm told we have now touchdown. Tim McMahon is available. What's up, Tim? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain today.
Hey, how you doing, Will?
So, Tim, let's start with Woj's news, first of all, that Daryl Morey is willing to do whatever it takes, entertain all trade possibilities to get better. Woj has said specifically it's hard to imagine a James Harden scenario, and the options would be extremely limited, but do you think that's a real consideration for the Rockets, one they would put on the table?
I think we're very close to wasting our breath if we're discussing James Harden trade scenarios. I mean, it is a minute possibility. I think they would like to trade Chris Paul, but that's very hard to do simply because of the contract, his age, the fact that he's already showed decline. I think it's going to be hard to trade Chris Paul and make your team better right away. Their most attractive asset in terms of players on their roster in the trade market is Clint Capella. And, you know, I'd heard even late in the season that they plan to pretty aggressively shop Clint Capella. I mean, he's a guy who they locked into a 5-year contract at frankly, probably less than market value. I mean, they're able to get him on the cheap because it was a tight market. I say cheap relatively because it was a tight market last year because he was a restricted free agent. But Capella, even though he did not have a great postseason, he's 25. He's an ascending talent. He's on a very reasonable, I would even say team-friendly contract locked in for 4 more years. That's their most attractive asset. Now, how exactly can they use that to, again, immediately make this team better? That's Daryl Morey's challenge. But if one of their core guys gets traded, I think he's by far the most likely.
Let's back our way into James Harden. Talking to Tim McMahon here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. What do you think the Rockets could get for Capella? A couple of weeks ago on First Take, Tim, I offered up this scenario. I said, what about Capella for a guy like Kevin Love? It would get the Rockets older, and they'd lose a ton on defense, but they would get a third option offensively, the one that could stay on the court, you would think, in the playoffs as compared to Capella. But I don't know what Capella's market is right now. I don't know what the desire across the league is for Clint Capella. What do you think?
I mean, who can't Capella stay on the court against? You want to tell me the Warriors, and then you want to tell me that Kevin Love at center is going to stay on the court against the Warriors? Guess what? Every center in the league has trouble staying on the court against the Warriors. I mean, this is a very specific, historically elite challenge. So I don't think – look, I'll be honest. Here's what I've heard late in the season that the Rockets rather hope to be able to do is use Capella as a centerpiece to go get Anthony Davis. Very ambitious, honestly, very hard to envision that happening. I mean, you can throw Capella and every other asset you can think of.
Yeah, Tim. I mean,
draft picks, everything else.
If we're bound by what's realistic, though, I don't know that would win any trade proposal for Anthony Davis. Clint Capella is your centerpiece.
Well, and it would require some extreme creativity, probably getting a third or even a fourth team involved. But again, to me, if you're going Capella for love, just to take your proposal, I think that's a step in the wrong direction. I don't think it makes them better offensively, because I think the way Capella complements Harden is very critical to what the Rockets do offensively. If you don't have a lob threat on the floor, then it's a completely different spacing element.
Okay.
And then defensively, I just think you're taking such a drastic step backwards. That's not a move that gets the Rockets any closer to a championship.
Okay, I'll accept your critique of my proposal, but I'm going to take it here. I also don't think your Capella for Anthony Davis is going to be one that wins Anthony Davis trade. So, but I think
and I completely agree.
So I think what we arrived at is, here's what I think. Honestly, Tim, I don't think Clint Capella is going to trading Clint Capella. I don't see as a way. I'm not saying they shouldn't consider it. I don't know how it's going to markedly get the Rockets better. Like, what's it going to bring back? That's what we're trying.
And that's what Daryl Morey is trying to figure out right now. Now everything's on the table. Obviously, he's being aggressive in his talks with other general managers, and this is the time for him to kind of figure out what exactly his options are.
And that's why I want to keep walking down the steps, though, because I agree with something you said a minute ago, too. Let's move to the Chris Paul part, though, right? Talking to Tim McMahon, by the way, ESPN's Rockets reporter here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain filling in. Chris Paul, at his age, man, I also don't know what the market is for him that would make the Rockets better in whatever they would get back. I almost see a real similar situation to what we just did with Capella.
No, and I agree with you 100% on that. Look, Chris Paul's contract is a problem. There's no nice way to put that. He's owed $120-some-odd million over the next 3 years, and he showed fairly significant decline last season. So it's hard. The problem with trading Chris Paul is you are either giving up assets to kind of ease the pain for the team taking on that contract, or you're taking on another bad contract in return. For example, I'm sure Daryl Morey could call the Washington Wizards and get a Chris Paul for John Wall discussion going, and that would be a terrible move for the Rockets. It wouldn't make them better next year with Wall coming off an injury, and it's a longer deal than the one they're getting off of. But it's just really hard for me to see any kind of deal with Chris Paul where the Rockets aren't taking back a similarly bad contract in return. And again, we're talking about what gets them closer to a championship next season.
Right.
I think it's going to be tough for Morey. I'd never rule out him pulling a rabbit out of his hat, but I think this is going to be extremely difficult for him to make a trade that really pushes them that much closer. And honestly, I think what the Rockets really need to be careful of doing is making a panic move. Mm-hmm. Look, you are the one franchise that has challenged the Warriors since Kevin Durant, got to the Bay Area. So you're close. Let's not make a panic move just because you got knocked out in 6 this year, just because you got knocked out a round earlier. The other thing here that we haven't discussed yet is, okay, are you fully funded here, basically? Is Tillman Fertitta willing to pay what it takes to kind of sustain a contender? Or when you're making these trades, are finance is part of motivation? Because if finance is a part of motivation, then, it's really hard to have one foot in trying to be, fiscally conservative and another in trying to be aggressive, chasing down a dynasty.
Well, so, okay, talking to Tim McMahon here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain, I have so many things I want to follow up with you on what you just said, Tim. Let's go with the last thing you said, though. Is Tillman Fertitta financially committed to making the Rockets a contender? I know he got offended by that very question, that very idea recently.
Oh, yeah.
Now
he gets offended by it. But you know what? I hear what he says, and then I see what he does. They don't go hand in hand. Do not tell me, like he told the Houston Chronicle, that it was a fluke that you didn't pay luxury tax last year when you did not use your mid-level exception. when you had your general manager make a series of trades that were specifically designed to cut costs. You gave up a first-round pick to get off a contract last year. You gave up a promising second-rounder, to get off of some money last year. They made a series of trades to duck under the luxury tax. And look, if you're a contender and you decide not to use your mid-level exception, and you're throwing out guys who are, start off the season on D-League or on two-way contracts, and they're in your rotation. Again, you can say you're being aggressive, but then we're watching what you're doing, and those are not moves that are aggressive. Those are moves that are very much let's duck under the tax. And if you're not willing to pay the tax, good luck competing with the dynasty.
Right. And then I think I don't want to belabor this, but then the question is, are you going to pay the luxury tax for a team you don't think can contend? I mean, I would respect that decision. I'm not going to pay it to be an also-ran. I'll pay it to contend, but it's a chicken or it's a chicken or egg thing.
And that's what he says. Yeah. That's what he says.
Right.
But guess what? You took the Warriors to 6 games. That's contending.
Right.
I mean, you can say, well, got knocked out in the second round. Okay. Maybe if you pay the mid-level exception, you're not a freaking 4 seed in the first place. Maybe if your summer, outside of signing Chris Paul to a max contract that you now regret and signing Capella to a team-friendly deal, maybe if your summer is not just, skimming the bargain bin and signing guys to minimum deals, maybe if you get a quality rotation player at the mid-level, that you're a 2 seed, a 3 seed, perhaps even a 1 seed, and you don't have to see the Warriors until the West Finals again. And so, again, they were a contender this year. They were absolutely a contender last year.
Right.
And so if that's your standard for paying a tax, then you should have paid it this year.
Talking to ESPN Rockets reporter Tim McMahon here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Will Kane filling in for Stephen A. Smith today. All right, we're working our way to Harden together really quickly here, Tim. But I have one more point I want to get with you on. We are in total agreement, believe it or not, so far, meaning I agree with you. There's a limited trade market for Clint Capella that can get you better. There's a limited trade market for Chris Paul that can also improve your squad. I also like the point that you made that don't make a panic move because the league is probably going to change next year. If Kevin Durant leaves the Warriors, maybe you don't have to get better. Maybe the rest of the league or the top of the league takes a step back to you. A Kevin Durant-less Warriors makes the Rockets much more of a contender than they have been. So I think standing pat is a
path. The Rockets might look at that and say, yeah, Kevin Durant-less Warriors knocked us out on our home court in Game 6.
That's true. That's true.
Steph Curry scored 33 in the second half, 23 in the fourth quarter. But I can follow. Now, I don't know that we're on the same page in terms of Capella's trade value. I do think Capella has significant trade value, but at the same time, I think Capella has a lot of value to the Rockets, and I think he is an outstanding fit as a kind of, I call him a complimentary star next to James Harden.
Well, unless we can come up with, and you and I are going to figure it out here in the next 2 minutes, what the Capella trade is. You don't like my Kevin Love proposal, and I'm okay with that. And I don't think an Anthony Davis trade with Capella as the centerpiece is realistic. What it does is back me in, Tim, to the idea of James Harden. Now, here's why I bring it up. Because Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that all players are under consideration. You said the idea of a Harden trade is minuscule, and I think that you're right. But I don't think that's a reason for us not to consider it. I think you have to consider everything. And I just wonder, is there a James Harden trade out there that can change the ceiling for the Warriors? Maybe change the timeline. Could shorten it. Can you raise your ceiling? Can you extend your timeline or do one or the other? And I'll be honest, I know it's highly unrealistic, but I can come up with one. I think LeBron for James Harden is actually a win for both squads. But do you see anything with James Harden? Anything? You don't have to work with mine making sense at all.
I mean, I really would be just absolutely shocked because they believe James Harden is the best player in the NBA, bar none. Certainly he's coming off the best offensive regular season in at least 50 years. For example, you mentioned the Harden for LeBron straight up. I don't think Daryl Morey would do that.
You don't?
I really don't. Simply because, like I said, they think James Harden's the best player in the league, and then you're trading a guy who is midway through his prime for a guy in LeBron. And look, who knows how long LeBron's prime lasts, but probably towards the tail end of his prime, for the first time, dealt with injuries last year that, that happens to guys as they get into their mid-30s. So I would be really, really surprised if that's something that Daryl Morey would even seriously consider.
Okay, last question for Tim McMahon here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, hosted by Will Cain today. What do you think, Tim? Who's gone first in Houston? Mike D'Antoni or Chris Paul?
Mike D'Antoni. Look, as Woj reported, the extension talks, as much as they ever got off the ground, they're stalled. At this point, based on people close to D'Antoni, he's anticipating that there will be no extension. He will come back on a one-year deal, and essentially it's either win or his run with the Rockets will be over. So, there's a very good chance that Mike D'Antoni has only 1 year left in Houston. And just because of Chris Paul's contract, I don't think that he'll be leaving Houston within the next year.
All right. Really good stuff. Fun conversation, Tim, and thanks for the information. I appreciate it.
Okay, appreciate you having me.
All right, that's Tim McMahon, ESPN's Rockets reporter here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. ESPN Radio recognizes National Military Appreciation Month. Brought to you by Navy Federal Credit Union. Proudly serving the armed forces, the DoD, veterans, and their families for over 80 years. Federally insured by NCUA. All right, I want to get to this proposal I have on how to fix the NBA and the NBA lottery. But I want to hit the Shell Pennzoil Performance line really quickly. Craig from Delaware. What's up, Craig? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, man.
I'm a diehard Laker fan, been a fan since 78, 79. I like the sound of that trade, LeBron for James Harden. Okay, but the one problem is this. If you trade LeBron James and you're already having problems getting free agents there, how do you assure those free agents that you want that you won't trade them later?
That's a good question, Craig, but I would offset it with this, okay? And you don't have to take him down, Kat. I think that's a really good question, Craig. It would undercut credibility of signing free agents in the future. On the other hand, you can't compare things against perfection. Are the Lakers in a perfect scenario right now? And what I mean by that is this. Are they having a good time convincing free agents to join LeBron James? Are they finding it successful to bring free agents to L.A.? Now, I know that free agency haven't started yet, and I know that they may surprise everybody. And there may be KDs and Kawhis and Clays and Kyries ready to join LeBron the minute free agency opens, and we're all going to be proven wrong. But right now, the Lakers have their own free agency problems. Without that, and I just wonder, and that's the thing about the Harden for LeBron trade, Craig, in a way, it's a 2-for-1. You get Harden, LeBron goes to Houston, and you open the door for some other free agents.
True.
How about this? You think KD would want to play with James Harden in L.A. with the Lakers? Now you open to the idea?
I'm open to it. I'm open to the trade, but my problem is the perception of it. With the way the NBA is now, you kind of have to cater to these stars the way they think.
Well, you know what you could do, Craig? Give him a no trade. You want KD, and he's worried about you're gonna do to him what you did to LeBron. Give him a no trade clause.
Yeah, that sounds good. But if I'm not mistaken, in the CBA, isn't there limited ways to give out no trade clauses now?
I don't know. Limited ways? What do you mean by limited ways?
If I'm not mistaken, didn't they try to curtail that with giving people because everybody was asking for no trade clauses? And it came out that you had to be in the league a certain amount of years or something. I could be wrong. I could be.
But most of the guys we're talking about would hit those qualifications. I'll tell you what, Craig. I'll look it up. I'll have my crack research team, a.k.a. Nuno, get on that. I appreciate the call, man. Let me. I want to shift gears really quick. Well, I'll tell you what. Here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the idea of doing away with the NBA lottery. Hell, I want to talk about doing away with the idea that the worst team always gets the top pick in the NBA draft, or at least gets the best odds in the NBA draft in the lottery system. In fact, the Knicks didn't get it, right? Who got it? Who got the top pick? New Orleans Pelicans. 9th best odds. Do you know what the New Orleans Pelicans would be in my new proposal? The 5th seed in a tournament between 14 teams who do not make the playoffs. A lottery tournament to see who gets the top pick in the NBA draft. I promise you, every one of you will be in on this idea. And you know who else is at least considering such drastic measures? NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. I'll play for you what he has to say about some of these ideas and lay it out for you next on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Need